Really surprised no one noticed that this was Guillermo Del Toro.
I ate him first!
So since I dropped my Pacific Rim video talking about how great the first film was and just how shitty the sequel was, there's been talks in the comments section about what Del Toro had planned for the sequel, as well as what could have worked in Uprising, if given the right amount of attention, and people saying what they could have done for a second film, or hell, even a third film if they really wanted to. So I'm basically going to compile a bunch of these topics together into one video and discuss it a little bit, because Pacific Rim is awesome and it gives me a reason to talk about it just a little bit longer before I move on to other topics. So we're going to have 3 sections here. First, what Del Toro had planned himself. Second, what could have worked in Uprising. And third, what they could have done instead, or what they could do in the future. Got it? Good? Let's move it.
This movie was made by people who love monsters and giant robots. For people who love monsters and giant robots.
So as I mentioned in my previous video, Del Toro came up with a script for Pacific Rim 2 back in like 2015, where it was then rewritten twice before they filmed Uprising. And for years, many wondered what exactly he had planned and where he was going to take it next. Well, back in 2021, while promoting Nightmare Alley, which is a good movie you should check out by the way, he was asked this very question, and he gave some insight into what he had planned. Here's his full response here if you want to read it, but I'm going to break it down very simply. Basically, a tech guy invents the internet 2.0, and people start thinking that he got the tech from the precursors, the aliens from the first film. But then they realized that the precursors from the first film were actually humans from the future, and the reason they looked like aliens is because they were wearing these echo biosuits, and they were sending kaiju back in time because they were harvesting Earth for its resources, because they depleted theirs. Also, Mako would have had a much bigger role and been one of the leads, instead of, killed off like she was in Uprising. Now, he doesn't touch on much more besides that, so I don't know how kaiju and Jaegers would have been involved again. I guess the tech guy would start making kaiju or something, and that's how we get these big awesome fights again. Now, this is pretty interesting, but to be honest, I'm not really a big fan of it, mainly because of the precursors being humans from the future and sending kaiju back in time to harvest the Earth. I just think that sometimes time travel can make things a bit messy, but my guess is they would probably establish that there's multiple timelines or whatnot. Well, I do like Mako having a bigger role in the movie and not being killed off after 2 scenes. But that's not all. We got some more information about some other ideas that Del Toro had. I found several different wiki pages and articles about it dating all the way back to 2014, and some of these ideas were actually used in Pacific Rim Uprising. Like for example, he wanted to explore the fact that Newt drifted with a kaiju, and wanted to do a kaiju Jaeger hybrid, as well as bring back Gypsy Danger from the first film. And later on, 2017, he actually mentioned several locations that they wanted to have action sequences in. They wanted to have one by a river as well as a desert, then eventually have the final battle take place in San Francisco. And that's really about all we know that Del Toro had planned for Pacific Rim 2. And some of these ideas were used, but I think in better hands, they could have been good. I'm still not a fan of the precursors being future humans and having time travel be involved, but I will say, it definitely would have been unique and different, which is exactly what Del Toro was going for. Alright, so now let's talk about what could have worked in Uprising if it was given the proper attention and it had a better execution. And well, ironically, it's some of the stuff that I just mentioned that were some of Del Toro's ideas. But first, I want to say that the whole movie itself would need a tonal overhaul. It would have to cut down on the quips and the jokey banter, and basically, it just has to match the tone and style of the first movie. From there, then we can proceed. I mean, it doesn't have to be one for one exactly the same, but this MCU imitation just doesn't work. It's just trying too hard to be funny. So first off, change that. Okay, so what could have worked in Uprising? I think Newt drifting with the kaiju and that having consequences should have been the main focus, because it's really not a bad idea. Having what's left of the precursor's consciousness influence and control Newt. That, along with the corporation working on the drones and then having those Jaeger kaiju hybrids, aren't terrible ideas. But that's really what the main conflict should have been, and more importantly, it should have been introduced much earlier in the movie, not almost halfway through. And instead of trying to open the breach again to bring forth some more kaiju, just have a facility where they make them. I mean, they basically do that already. Plus, the breach was destroyed in the last film, so it doesn't really make much sense of where these 3 kaiju came from in Uprising anyway. I mean, they fucking nuked the other side, so that doesn't make any sense. Hell, what they could have done is just have kaiju start popping up out of nowhere, and then everyone has no idea where they're coming from, because, the breach is closed. Then finally a Jaeger actually loses a fight against one, and then a drone that's made by that shady company, who also made the kaiju, remember, comes in and saves the day, so they can look good and get some funding. And then you can have it revealed that Newt is helping them make kaiju. And then you can do his evil little double cross thing where he unleashes a big one. Hell, at this point I'm just kind of tossing out ideas. And honestly, they're the same ones that are in the movie, because they're not bad ideas, just the execution wasn't good, because the focus of the movie was just all over the place. I mean, something they could easily cut out is that whole child pilot training stuff. That shit was kind of dumb. Honestly, I feel like they included all this stuff so that it can attract more kids to the movie, but come on, there's giant robots and monsters fighting. Kids are already interested, so cut out that shit so they can shift the attention to the actual main conflict. And I think Mako should have been the lead, and then they could have brought in her brother to help out, have him use his connections to the criminal underworld to help dig up information about this shady company and where the kaiju are coming from. Then hell, have him and Mako drift together at the end in a Jaeger to take out a big kaiju for the final showdown. And again, a lot of this stuff is in the movie. The ingredients are there. Some of the ideas are pretty damn good. It just needs some refinement and better focus. And then it could have actually worked.
Say you want this!
Now for this last section, I want to talk about what they could have done for a sequel, or hell, even as like a third installment. And this is where Del Toro and I are going to disagree. But I think they should have done a prequel focusing on that 5-year gap where humanity started losing the war against the kaiju. Del Toro, though, explicitly said that he didn't want to do that. He felt that it would have been too similar to the first film, and instead he wanted to do something completely different, hence the time travel and whatnot. And I understand that, I do, but I still think it would have been cool to explore that time period, to be able to see and experience humanity getting pushed to the brink. Hell, they could have done like a Halo Reach route, where the heroes die in the end, losing a very pivotal position, but getting everyone out alive. Hell, taking down a huge kaiju with them. They mentioned in the first film that they only have 4 Jaegers after that 5-year gap. So you can show that. Show mankind getting its shit wrecked for 5 years. Sure, it wouldn't have been the most original or brand new idea, but in the right hands, it could have been pretty badass. And in the end, isn't that what we want? Also, in that time span, you can show new locations as well as touch on how they developed the Jaegers. Show people living in fear, how their lives are changing, the development of the wall concept, as well as the rise of the criminal underworld. You know, the things that are touched on in the first film, but could be explored a bit more here. And again, I know it's not the most original or like brand new route to take, but I think it'll just be giving the people more of what they wanted, which was primarily the really cool kaiju fights. Simple, sure, but I think it could have worked. Alright, so I think that'll about do it. At this point, we're just left with a bunch of what ifs regarding the series. What if they did a prequel? What if they did Del Toro's original script? What if they focused on this instead of that? But that's all we got are what ifs. The point is, they didn't, so
I guess we'll never know.
maybe leaving it as a one-off was probably the best idea.
Me, not you, but me! Every day!
Well, actually, that's none of your business.